Good evening. It is Wednesday, August 21st, and we're discussing My Last Innocent Year by Daisy Alpert Florin. And we're going to get to Brenda's question in a hot minute here. But first, let me share with you, let's see here. No, I want to share with you what she looks like.
Here we are.
I mean, to me, she looks young. Maybe, oh, here's Merle. You can see she's a beautiful girl.
Yeah. Agree.
Yeah. And at our, we had a long talk at the short story. Merle was there this morning about what is beautiful and beautiful inside and outside. And so let me read you her bio, and then we're gonna dig deep in. Daisy Alpert Florin attended Dartmouth College, which obviously is wilder, but back to that in a minute, and received graduate degrees from Columbia University and Bank Street Graduate School of Education. Never heard of it. She's a recipient of the 2016 Catherine Gerfine Writing Fellowship at Sarah Lawrence College. I know they have a great writing program. And was a 2019-20 fellow in the Bookends Novel Revision Fellowship, where she worked with founding director Susan Scarf Merrill. Never heard of any of that. A native New Yorker, Daisy lives in Connecticut with her family. Okay, so let's delve into. Do you think this was a good title for the book? My Last Innocent Year.
Yeah, I think she was innocent at first.
Yeah.
Except for the sex.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm sorry, girls.
we're gonna get. It's a lot of sex, and we're gonna get to it.
Yeah.
Well, she was innocent as far as delving into people's characters. I think that came more with maturity.
Yeah. So Brenda asked, she said that she never went away to school. Was this typical of when you go away to school? I went away to school, but I graduated in 1981. This is, 20 years later. And the other thing that we have to remember is that it's set against the backdrop of Monica Lewinsky, which makes it super interesting.
Yeah.
And it was before Me Too.
Oh.
Before Me Too. And, now we can look back on all of that. And there's a couple movies, and I really should go back and watch some of them because, we don't, we have to give the people who, started the Me Too movement so much credit because they really got something going here. And I'm not going to say that, I don't know if this is indicative or not, but I thought it was pretty realistic. In fact, the minute I heard she went to Dartmouth, I'm like, oh my God, I wonder if this is autobiographical. Which I have heard. I heard an interview with her, and the interviewer didn't ask. Was asking, what other books are you? I was like, how can you not ask? What happened to Dartmouth? So, and there aren't a lot of Jewish kids at Dartmouth, but there are a few. And so I thought that part was very realistic. And I'm also kind of dying to know, where did she grow up in New York? Because growing up on the Lower East Side is way different than Edith Wharton's, her thesis in New York, or even, some of her friends. Andy.
At my law school, there was one professor who had serial girlfriends.
Was he married?
He happened not to be, but I'm not sure it mattered. I'm not sure it really mattered. And I think in this book, it was fairly provocative in terms of who really had the power. These young women, or the professors who might take advantage of being the center of attention and having sort of their pick of the admiring women.
So there's a, I should have written this down. There's a part in there and, Connolly reads to her and says to Isabel, you're not the victim and you had the power. But reading it the second time, I think he was grooming her all from the day one.
Mhm.
Grooming her and, giving her compliments, tearing down Andy, the whole 9 yards. And when you look at it through those lenses, it's even creepier.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I think he was definitely using her to his own means.
Yeah. So
Well, I thought it was interesting in the beginning of their sexual relationship, how he told her, or he asked her, he said, tell me exactly what you want me to do.
yes.
I thought that was kind of interesting because I don't,
Well, right, because he's preparing himself if he gets caught. Well, she gave me her consent.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
And it, turns thing. And here's the thing. And we're living after the Me Too movement. So even if she said, I want to have sex, I want to do this, I want to do that. That was her professor. That was somebody who was in power at the school. Does she have, well, obviously, and look, she was attracted to him, so on and so forth. But, did she have the power to say no to him?
Well, he wasn't really a permanent member of the staff at the college.
Yeah.
There's that too, okay? And I mean, the fact that he used her to the degree that he did, but she was so infatuated with him and she kept saying how handsome he was and all of that. So this was an infatuation on her part, and he was strictly using her for his own needs at the time.
Yeah.
That's the way I looked at it.
I kept thinking about, and I watched the Today Show, and when the whole thing went down with Matt Lauer,
Oh,
and and people were kind of hemming and hawing, and he had a producer, whatever, who he locked in the room, and and then they had an affair. That was her boss. How could she say no? And not that this was Isabel's boss, but I think when you have that power injustice, it's hard for the woman to say no.
but she didn't really want to, I don't think.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
a C4
there's
there.
that.
Okay.
There's that.
Andy.
Well, I tend to disagree, that I had been in similar situations. I had one professor bring me to
Hello?
his apartment in a
Wait, hold on a second.
tuxedo and cook me dinner. Caught me a little off guard, and he made a little advance, and I said, no. It could have impacted my grades, whatever, and this was way back when the men had more power. She was getting a lot of benefits in terms of her writing, in terms of her self-esteem. I think she was a very mixed up young woman.
Mhm.
Couldn't even push this Zev Lev off of her with stop, or,
Right.
you
Well,
know,
and so that's my next question. Did Zev rape her?
no,
No, I don't think so.
no. It was,
I mean, was it a date rape? I mean, she didn't say no.
She didn't say no. And
and she
she
didn't
didn't,
fight him. She was
no.
just sort of there, and
Mhm.
it was a very bad, abusive encounter, but she
Yes.
just lay there and took it.
Yeah.
I think she was surprised by it too. She really hadn't expected it. But if you're a young girl and you go to some guy's room, what do you think is gonna happen? I mean, let's be real here.
And she says that later on in the book. I went
Mhm.
to his room. What did I expect?
Mhm.
I listen, I hope that our young women today are armed with the words to just, if you don't, if this feels uncomfortable, say no. And that doesn't mean that a boy can't overpower you, or a young man, whatever they are, a boy man, I call the man boy, that they can't overpower you. But I think we have to give our women, our young women, the words and agency over their own bodies.
Well, they weren't on a date though, I don't think. They kind of,
No, she
no.
went to his room.
but she went to his room with him, and I think she expected something like that to happen, but I guess
Yeah.
maybe not quite the way he did it,
He
his
did it, yeah.
performance, the way
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
was so rough with her.
Right.
But also, just like she was with the professor, she was looking for attention, and she was looking for that male attention. And, a college girl at that age, that's kind of where I was at that age. Not that I would have done any of that kind of stuff, but a lot of women at that age during those times, would be that way because
Yeah.
they were really looking for the attention.
Abby, go ahead.
It's very flattering and to some. And there's that old expression about power is the greatest aphrodisiac. And I just think all of a sudden having somebody in authority pay attention to you, and she certainly had the interest. I mean, how many of us have ever, gone to little area of going to a physician and your heart's a little bit offbeat because maybe he's a little bit more attractive or whatever. I mean, I can just see it's not a black or white issue. It's just I think any intention was there necessarily, certainly not on her part initially, but subliminally, I just don't think it's a yes or a no. I think it's a lot of relationships are so gradual in how they morph into things. And I think you can have all the words, but if your feelings aren't in sync with the words aren't going to come out so strong.
How do you imagine Isabel would have reacted after her encounter with Zev if Deborah wasn't in the room? Merle. Wait. And go.
It would have gone very differently.
Yeah.
She never said he raped her, but by Deborah's definition, it was date rape. Whatever Deborah's expectations were of a man, it was not the same for Isabel. Deborah maybe thought he should have asked her first, or really gotten more of a sense verbally before he physically moved forward. So for Deborah, it was date rape. So that's why she said, oh, let's go put that on the door. And I thought the interview with Dean Hansen was very sensitive. I thought he was really very sensitive. He said, we're going to forget this. We're not going to do anything to punish you, but you have to think about what your relationship is with Zev and how you want to go forward with that. And he gave her the name of another professor who was the counselor. And I
Who
just
was in the basement of some building?
Yes.
Yeah.
all
A
of the
woman. There was a woman.
lower
Yeah.
possible, right?
Yeah.
I really think that Deborah was a very important character because she was obviously the beginning of the Me Too movement. She was very, very vocal.
Yeah. And I'm Evie, and then I'll comment.
He's true about Deborah, and I'm confusing a couple of the women there, so I may be wrong. But I thought that one of them, there might have been a potential lesbian interest.
Deborah.
Okay. And
But
that would sway it a little bit.
yeah, although she had boyfriends, I mean, listen, I think the character of Deborah, and I don't know this for a fact, but I'm sure the author, Daisy, rolled people together. She was depressive, she was manic, she wanted to, she was super messy in the room, and the other roommate, Kelsey, had really had it.
Yeah.
And I keep thinking, is Deborah sympathetic? Do we like her? Deborah and Isabel are very loyal to one another through their whole, I mean, through their young adult lives until the book ends.
Yeah.
And that part is very interesting. And I do think at the very end at the party and Zev corners Isabel and her nose starts bleeding and Deborah said, "Did he hit you?" I mean, she's overprotective and maybe there is a lesbian element to that. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Merle.
I think Deborah had a side of her. She got married too, and she was even at Isabel's wedding, but I think there was a side of her that was man-hating.
Right.
And
I don't know if she got married to Louise.
well, they were together at the
They were
wedding.
together and they had a kid.
And
Yeah.
this is the part that I thought was fascinating. Even at the wedding, she said to Isabel about Isabel's white dress, "This is all tangled up in patriarchy and the suppression of female sexuality." She didn't want her to wear a white dress.
Right,
That
right.
this lasted all the way up until the time Isabel got married.
Yeah.
That she was very protective of her and trying to control her. And she was a very important character in the book, I thought.
Absolutely, because right, the whole thing with Zev wouldn't have happened, I don't think. I agree with that. And you know, and at the very end where she wanted to vandalize the statue, but and Isabel's like, "Well, did you think about the cameras? Did you think about, the things that Isabel was talking about was not what the problem was." So I thought that was also but she was in a manic stage. And then when she got depressed, I also think in 1997, mental health might have been a taboo subject. And even today, although we talk about it and people know mental health, I still think people are very circumspect to bring it up. Or to tell an employer, or to tell the school.
Mhm.
I don't, that's a hard thing to do. I think, and this week with the death of Phil Donahue, I think talk shows, Phil Donahue, Oprah Winfrey, they allowed people to speak about some of these mental health and all these different issues that before that you never spoke about.
It's the personal turmoil in their lives that they're not speaking about. And you're right, these talk show hosts got people to come out of their shell, so to speak,
Yeah,
and
right.
share it with other people in hopes
Right.
that maybe they could get help besides
Right.
helping other people.
And that, it's not unlike breast cancer. I'm trying to
Right,
think of some of the
right.
early breast cancer
Well, a
survivors.
lot of those kinds of things were really taboo. I mean, cancer was taboo, sexuality was taboo. You just didn't talk about those things. So it's understandable. And a lot of people in that age, I mean, it's in the 90s, but they were brought up by people whose parents were in the 60s, 50s, 60s, and you were brought up not to bring those kinds of subjects out, especially in public, and especially the mental health thing too.
Yes.
That
Yes.
was very much taboo.
Yeah. I think it's still a little bit taboo today. I think
Mhm.
people are better about it. And I hope that people seek out therapists and it's not you don't get a total reaction, but I don't think people, talk about it a lot. I could be wrong.
Well, I know in my own instance, not anything mental, thank goodness. But when I was a young girl, the only thing my mother ever talked to me about was getting my period. We never talked about sex.
Mhm.
Never. I mean, I knew what to expect with it, but she never ever brought up
How
sex.
did you know?
I think I just knew from now
From
that
what?
I'm trying to figure out how to tell you what I knew and what to expect. Maybe from school, from health classes and all that stuff. But my mother never told me what it was like to have sex with a man and how a baby, I knew how a baby came, but she never explained the actual act of sex and what I should expect.
Yeah. I said,
And
I
this is
forget
going back
why.
into the 50s, of course.
In the short story this morning, we were talking about sex too, and I don't remember why. Merle, if you remember, let me know. But I did say, 30 years ago when I taught confirmation, I had a whole thing on sex and, sacred choices and your body is sacred. And I talked about birth control. First of all, I'm not in the school, but we wouldn't do that now. These kids have the internet. If they want to know what's birth control, that's one click away. If they
Yeah.
want it, unfortunately, I think they have a unrealistic view of sex because of porn and how it's depicted in the movies and so on and so forth.
Right,
But
for sure.
yeah, it's just it's different. It's a changing way out there. Evie.
Yeah, I'm with Marilyn on that because I also did not have that conversation at all with my mother, and I think the whole thing was getting a little booklet. I think it was called "Growing Up and Liking It" that came with maybe with a Modest or something like that at the Kotex or whatever at the time. I just remember that little pamphlet, and I do remember saying, being concerned about. I mean, I didn't go away to camp. She was talking about somebody else whose mother was concerned about getting her period before first going to camp and so on and so forth. So it wasn't like a personal conversation. It was about somebody else. So I never, and I think about that all the time that I never had that conversation. And I spoke recently with my sister-in-law who is more my age, and she never had that conversation with her mother either. Whereas a few years ago, maybe 5 years ago, one of my granddaughters came up to me and she said, just heard how babies are born. She said, look at my family the same way again. And
I
so they're, it's a whole different comfort level and
Yeah. I mean, I did go away to camp, and at camp I learned how to use a tampon. I don't
Yeah.
think my mother would have been capable of telling
Right.
me how and I remember, and this, my friend Lolly took me in, said, this is what you do, don't wear those pads. And I remember that as clear as day. I also remember, so my mother's 91, I'm 65. When I went through menopause, I started asking my mom about menopause, and she didn't want to talk about it. And I want, because how she went through menopause is how I'm going to go through menopause. But, that, again, Lynn just said, cancer, all these things that generation didn't talk about.
And my sister is 3 years younger than me.
Yeah.
And we've never talked about this, but I don't know if my mother ever told her anything either.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
she
now
didn't talk to me.
You could talk to her about it now, Merle.
I
Go ahead.
am. I'm going to ask her that.
Right. So, hey.
Yeah.
1950s, like 1955, I was given a book called What's Happening to Me. And that's all I was ever given.
Right.
There was never a talk. I remember I went away to college. I knew nothing. And my friends, someone gave me a book at college. I remember that about Love Without Fear or something like that. I mean, it's very funny that they relied so much on books, and
Yeah.
yet we survived and we learned, I guess, along the way. But I think it's so funny that now, yes, they'll have a talk with a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old boy, and they'll have a nice talk with them now, which I think is so much better than just the impersonal book.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I
And
remember.
we talk to our kids, and I always say it's an ongoing conversation. And
Mhm.
as Lital got older and she works in a school, she goes, Mom, you never told us about masturbation. So I was better than my mom. And Lital, don't tell her I told you this. She's like, giving me what the curriculum is going to be for the next generation. Lynn, go ahead.
No, I just remember one of my roommates in college got Masters and Johnson's book. And that's
Oh,
how
right.
because we learned about it because it
Yeah.
had, recently come out. And that was, but I remember in grade school, they invited Like the guys went to one classroom and the girls went to another, and the mothers came in and they talked about menstruation. And I do remember that, but my mother never talked to me about sex
Right.
at
Yeah.
all.
No,
Yeah.
I don't think they were capable. They didn't have the words. And I do think that these talk shows, I really believe, because I was coming of age during the talk shows, that you could talk about, it lets you talk about abuse and you know, parents being abusive and the whole thing. Sandy?
I was selected by the principal of my school to go down to the Board of Education and take a course, and I was supposed to be teaching sex education. My students were 5th grade through 8th grade. We weren't allowed to teach anything really about sex education. We were allowed to talk about menstruation, and that was it. You couldn't show a rubber, you couldn't show talk about anything to do with the boys' genitalia, anything like that. And I remember my last year at that elementary school in the South Side, I had 7 students pregnant in the elementary school.
Wow.
Between the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, there were 7 girls pregnant at the end of the semester.
No, that's unreal.
Yeah.
Or-
That, you know, listen, I think our kids here on the North Shore are sexually active, but certainly they know more about birth control, and that's just a wow number, Sandy.
Yeah.
Merle.
Isabel said something at one point that I thought was so true about college. She said, yeah, you're there, you're going to classes, you're going to get a degree. But she said the real purpose of college is having friends, learning about love and intrigues. And that is what she saw it as. But when she went into the stacks in the library, she had this kind of euphoric experience about feeling like the books are larger than the whole world. So she was getting something really positive from going to school, and she was writing. But this thing about the friends, the love, the sorority, the fraternity, you know, it becomes so much bigger for some people than actually going to the classes. I guess unless you're in pre-med, I think those people took it a little more seriously.
Right. Listen, I think they were all different types of students, and you know, and it also depended on your intellect. You know, some people could go, you know, and ace a test after reading the book once. Other people had to study forever. Isabel's thesis focuses on the literary examination of domestic spaces in Edith Wharton's The Age of Innocence. I have read it. I love Edith Wharton, but it's like the Gilded Age. A novel that examines wealth and class. How do wealth and class play a role at Wilder College? Brenda.
Well, I think certainly in the clothes and jewelry that they have. And Isabel, while she was in high school, wanted these things too. And her dad couldn't afford to give it to. So she stole things. And she stole things mostly from her friends. And then I guess she stole something and got caught and then stopped. But the inclination never left her. I mean, she always curious what other people had. So I think things like that. And then certain kids during winter break could go skiing while others, couldn't.
Or went down to
Really.
Florida.
I went down to Florida, right.
Wasn't she stealing also at the time her mother was sick and dying?
Yeah.
And
That's
she was
when
like,
they-
what, 16, I think, when her mother died?
Yeah.
So she did a lot of it at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
then
she-
she stopped for a
She
while.
stopped, but I think when things started to go south in college,
Yeah,
and she was in a bad place, just like I think, like she was in a bad place when her mother died. Then
Yeah.
she got the inclination to steal again.
but didn't
And-
she take stuff and then put it back?
Yeah, she was
some
going to take
cases.
stuff from Kelsey, and you know, as you're reading it, part of you, like when Deborah writes rapist on Zev's door, you're like, don't do that. Or, when she's going to steal from her roommate, don't, you cringe inside. And I actually thought that the writing I thought it was well written. And obviously this is from, Daisy is a young woman looking back on, and it's even reflected in the writing saying, this is what I thought college is. This is what I thought adults do. And I thought those passages were not only poignant, but realistic.
Well, there were a couple of things that Isabel commented on about her, that her mother said and her dad said. Her mother was very artsy, and in her knitting, sometimes if there was a problem, she said, "Oh, just start over again.
Rip it out."
Would rip it out." And her dad, I don't remember the exact quote, but this was very interesting. When Connolly admitted that he was hiding
Tom.
and
Ergang.
Yeah.
Yeah.
in his cabin, and he said, "You have to promise not to tell." Her dad's, he could tell they were having a phone conversation, and he could tell that she was very disturbed. And she said, "I can't tell you what it's about." And then he said, "Well, there's problems, and we try to solve them. Can you live with what you're doing? Can you change? Something you can." And I thought that was beautifully written. And I think ultimately that's what helped her decide what she should do.
I agree with you. And I think the twist, I think the ending, I thought it was a great ending that, Ergain was in that cabin and would have died if Isabel hadn't told the police, because Tom had died. Oh, that's my question for you all. Do you think Tom and or Connolly died of suicide? Do you think they purposely, Tom fell down the ravine and Connolly crashed his car?
I don't think Tom would have committed suicide because of his daughter.
Mm,
I think his death was probably an accident because he loved his daughter very, very much, according to the story.
yes.
So I cannot see him going away. And he was gone for what, 2 or 3 days by the time they found her?
2 weeks.
2 weeks, pardon me. Yeah, 2 weeks. But I think she was only alone without him for 2 or 3 days.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
And I really believe that his death was an accident. I don't think he would have committed suicide.
Yeah.
Connolly, I think he was kind of really messed up. And that at the premise of his taking his own life, I would believe that about him.
Yeah.
That's my personal opinion, everybody.
Marilyn, I agree with you.
Mhm.
And I think, I don't know how, Isabel felt as an adult looking back, but certainly, in the throes of it, like, and you've read other books. Oh, they're never, he's going to get a divorce and he doesn't love his wife and they're separated, and, all these excuses. And I think that Isabel also liked the secrecy when she was having the affair with Connolly. And then you read on that she had affairs with, a parent in the school, and there's something that drove her to that secret, to keep those things secret. Thoughts on that?
Or was it just the excitement of it being secret? Because sometimes it's that way when people do have affairs.
Yeah.
It's more the excitement of it all and the risk taking.
Also the stealing and the secretiveness of the stealing. At first I think the stealing was, need or desire or whatever, but then when she was having problems later on, it was kind of reverting back to what was her comfort level then in terms of you know, what she was able to accomplish maybe in terms of the stealing is also something tangible, whereas her writing, which was her passion, until it's done, it's not tangible.
Interesting. Yeah. Merle.
I thought it was really fascinating when Connolly asked her something about a line in her book about we were girls in the bodies of women. And he said, did you really mean that? And she said, yes. But before she said yes, she was thinking about, you know, what made a girl a woman. And she really, there was so many thoughts going in her around in her head, but she finally just said, yes, we were just girls in the body of a woman. And I think that's true. There's this evolution. You do become a woman eventually, but when you first start out at college, you're a girl, 17, 18, you're just a child. And the thing about Connolly had said that his wife, they were separated. His wife called her though, called her,
Right.
said, I know you were trying to contact him. What was your relationship with him? I mean, she was so nice. She said, I just didn't want you to keep sending manuscripts to him. Because he's dead. But that was so kind of her to call Isabel. And
You don't think she wasn't suspicious?
maybe
She had all those affairs.
maybe she was, but she sure put on a good act. She was so polite and
She had to know what kind of man her husband was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Then, yeah.
Sandy, did you have your hand up?
No, I didn't. I'm sorry. I should have.
Oh, no, not
Oh,
the other Sandy. Sorry.
Oh.
Okay, we're good. That was very poignant because, you know, as she's an adult and she has success, which I think Conley would have been very jealous of. The success she had as an adult because he really wanted that. And I think he was jealous of his wife, Roxanne, who did have that success and did have the money. And I kept waiting before I got to the end of why wasn't he writing her back? Why do you think he never wrote her back?
It's a good question. I wondered about that too, because she was writing them for a long time.
Yeah.
12 years. Was it like 12 years?
Yes. Yes.
That long, huh?
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
think
It was a
Yeah.
long time, Merle.
Yeah, right.
something about the college. She said, Wilder sheds students like a snake sheds its skin.
Mm.
I thought that was very interesting. And maybe he was like that too. Well, I'm done with her, so why do I have to bother even writing back? He didn't continue writing to the other girls before her. She found the picture of one of the
Uh-huh.
girls.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right. The one who was anorexic.
Anorexic. Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought the university does, it takes you up to a point and then your time runs out. She said, your time runs out, senior year, you're done and you leave. People do go back to the university for all kinds of reunions. Some are organized by the university or some by the fraternity or sorority. But it's true that you leave. And I think that was hard for her when she saw the university just letting everybody go. That's it now, shedding me like a skin. But I think that was a very important thing because some people think they could stay there forever and ever and ever. And I remember some people at Michigan who just couldn't leave Ann Arbor.
Yeah.
I knew
Or
about,
Champaign. I
Yeah.
think particularly in the Midwest, Madison, Champaign, Ann Arbor, people just stay there. And there are other jobs there, but some of them are just reliving. And look, I grew up in Crystal Lake. It's a tiny town. I'm one of the only people in my graduating class, I think, who they went away to college, but I went to Michigan. Like they didn't go out of state or and I knew when I left Crystal Lake when I was 18, I'd never go back. But so some people are living, you know, their memories of their best lives of, you know, they were big jocks in high school and they want to relive that life again.
Well, wasn't Wilder a much smaller school in comparison to
Oh
like?
yeah. Oh, it was a tiny school.
So
It's like a
that's
high school.
why
Yeah.
I don't think they would have had any great attachment to the school. More than a
Well,
bigger college, it has so much
yeah.
more to offer.
I disagree with that. I think people are
Sure.
very attached to Oberlin, Kenyon, all those teeny tiny schools.
Yeah, but this was a
Andy.
different kind of school.
Yeah,
You had asked why Connor didn't write her back, and I don't think he trusted her anymore after the event with Tom. They also no longer had the physical relationship, and there
Mhm.
wasn't this quid pro quo there. It just didn't exist. So the sex for mentoring. So
Yeah.
Maybe because she was getting very successful,
No, she wasn't.
or she was doing more, she was writing more,
Yeah,
wasn't she?
but I think at the end, I agree with Andy. He was mad because he knows that she turned in Tom.
Mhm.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
He's the only one that could know that.
Right, right.
And listen, again, I was hoping she didn't stay for the summer with him. I knew that would be a bad idea.
Yeah,
And until the very end, you're not sure. And I think, I could be wrong, that when she finds out that Connolly gives Tom the keys, that's when she said, I'm done with him, and that's it. I did think it was super sad, and I don't know how it plays in to the whole story. I mean, I know how it plays into the whole story, but they bring up Bo, and then she marries him, and then she has an affair, and then she divorces him. I thought that part was, I don't know. I don't know if I don't know.
it wasn't a happily
Didn't buy
ever
into
after love story as far as her
Yeah, yes.
marriage.
And
Yeah.
you don't have to have a happy ending, but I'm sorry, Lynn, what did you say?
No, you didn't buy into it, is what you're saying.
I didn't buy into it, yeah.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
seemed like
Seemed like
spot on.
too much. Yeah, too
It
much
was
to.
too, perfect.
Mhm.
That he was there, Merle, I'm gonna get to, and then Evie. And Connolly sees hit her with him. I don't know. It happenstance. Merle and then Evie.
I thought the best man in her life was her father.
Yes.
Yeah.
I asked her about her father's business, and she was explaining it's a kind of a deli, it's a kind of a
Yeah.
vegan deli. And the fact that her father finally got success when someone in the family, I don't know if his son, somebody got his business
nephew?
online, and he
Yeah.
was
Yes.
other
Or
special.
Benji. I don't forget how he was related.
I think he was a nephew.
Yeah.
And that the uncle Leon paid off her college loans. I thought that was so nice. The men in her family were really the best people in her life. And I used to go to lots of different reunions in Ann Arbor. And the last one I went to, I asked some of the people, well, was it the best 4 years of your life? And most of the men said yes. But the women said they loved being grandmothers. I mean, the women came up with something different.
Interesting.
I thought
Fascinating.
men
Mhm.
was the best 4 years of their life.
Evie.
I was going back to in terms of the letter writing, and I think women, and I'm generalizing, have more emotional lingering attachments, I think. I think men can kind of cut themselves off a little bit more in terms of the emotional stuff.
You're probably right. This is from a study guide, but you look so beautiful when you cry. This is what Professor Connolly says to Isabel before kissing her for the first time. How and why does her vulnerability appeal to Connolly? And I think that sentence right there just shows what a creep he is.
Mhm.
But why do you think what appealed to him?
But maybe he feels that he could mold her into what he wanted her to be because
Yeah.
she was that vulnerable.
Yeah.
And he knew that she was very attracted to him.
Yeah. I think that, but that's in the grooming and the whole thing. Sandy, go ahead.
I remember being at college in my junior year and thinking that, I never quite fit in at the college I went to. I went to Purdue, and I really never felt like I was in the right place. And then I met a professor and I started dating him. And I thought it was just, the most wonderful thing. Here was a mature guy, he had just come from the University of Chicago. And that seemed like, so much classier than the guys at Purdue. And I dated him, for quite a while. And we did everything but, in those days, there was no pill. I was terrified of getting pregnant, and I wasn't going to have sex with him. It was just a lot of dating and cuddling and studying together and
Were
touching.
you his student?
In one class I was, and I wouldn't have gotten through college math if I hadn't been dating him.
Interesting, because that just wouldn't go today.
Yeah. And then what happened about 25 years later, I happened to be passing through St. Louis, and he was now a professor at Washington University. So I called him up from the airport and we chatted. And he said if I was coming back that way again, that he'd love to see me and that I could, stay for a few days with him. And so on my way back to Chicago, I did stop in St. Louis, and he couldn't make it to the airport, but he sent two students. He told me two students would be looking for me at the airport. These two guys, twins, were walking around. I could tell they were looking for me, but he had told them, look for a girl named Sandy. A girl named Sandy. I was now in my 50s, I think.
Yeah. Well, that's
And-
how he remembered you as
Yeah.
a young
I
poet.
did stay there, and I met his kids. I mean, I wound up having 3 daughters. He wound up having 3 daughters. And he was just as nice as I remembered him. And I was
Wow.
really glad.
Yeah. I'm glad that turned out well. Those, Merle, go ahead.
There's a quote that's just like what Sandy said. I wrote it down. When you're young, you're figuring out the world and how we fit into it. And Sandy, you said you felt you didn't fit into that place.
I didn't. I should have been at Wisconsin. I wanted to go to Brandeis, and my parents were very old. My parents had me late in life, and they thought that was too far away and dangerous. So they wanted me someplace very close. Looking back, and from my friends who graduated from Madison, that's where I should have been.
We haven't talked yet about Isabel's memories of her mother. That whole situation is so sad. I think it also influenced when she got to school. The mother had died recently-ish. But how do you think the memories of her mother shape her present day decisions, and starting with her decisions in college? I kept thinking, did the mother really love the father?
Well, she was planning to divorce him, and
That's
then
right.
she found out she had cancer. So
Right,
she,
right. So she
because they
stayed.
were very different. She
Yeah.
was never interested in helping him in the
Right.
business. She was only interested in her art. And I guess the artistic gene did appear in Isabel also,
Yes.
Isabel,
Yeah.
a different
Writing.
artist. But
Yeah.
Absolutely. And they were both very passionate about their art. And Andy.
For whatever reason, Isabel, I think, had a tremendous lack of confidence in herself. And I don't know if you could blame it on the mother. The mother was busy, seemed like smoking cigarettes and waiting for a painting. But, what do they say? Nature or nurture? I don't know. But she was one insecure girl from every single interaction described. Half the time she couldn't remember why she did something, if she slept, if she was raped. Then with Deborah, it was, oh, yeah, I'll go with, well, yeah, I was, and then with Connolly, it's like, was she, wasn't she? And I know the mother had her own issues, and I don't know how much they went into describing. I don't remember any real bonding with the two of them, but I think maybe the mother's distraction with art and how the parents didn't connect. She, I think, had trouble viewing life and accepting herself, and then accepting somebody else who was available to her.
Yeah. I agree with all of that. Isabel deals with many older adult men in her life. Connolly, Tom was her, Thomas's marriage is imploding, and her widowed father. How is she shaped by grappling with their emotional luggage?
Well, like you said, she didn't have a lot of confidence in herself. And so she took on their burdens as her life and really didn't really have any ideas of her own. She went along with whatever they had to do or whatever they wanted to do. Like she ended up with Lev and she ended up with the professor. And it wasn't
Zev.
Zev. But anyway, it's yeah, I read the book a while ago, but it almost seems like she really didn't have her own ideas and really needed to focus on other people to get their ideas to figure out what she was going to do. And it's the same thing as she married this guy just because that was the next logical step, but it wasn't really what she really wanted. So she really never understood herself enough to know what she really wanted in life.
Yeah, that's very true.
Evie and then Merle.
Yeah, I think you both described that so beautifully, because you can relate to that. And when you're dealing with somebody else's emotional luggage and baggage, you don't develop your own stability and stand on your own 2 feet, and even the idea of knowing what do you want or what do you need. I mean, it's a foreign concept until you actually even think about that concept. We don't know the things that we don't know or need to. We don't know what we need to know. And I could just, as you're talking about, I could just feel like my part of my body just kind of bending over that way to kind of support that other luggage or whatever. So I think that that's a lot of what she was grappling with or dealing with when she's done at college.
And continued with,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Continues with,
her
yes.
life.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think it stays with you.
Yeah, Merle, go ahead.
I think she's getting these little nuggets of wisdom from people who aren't wise. And I think Connolly had said, people use youth as an excuse. We're all vulnerable. And then he said, the question is, who has more to lose? And then the next thing that followed was, an adult knows there are consequences. And she didn't know what the consequences were going to be. All of this. And it really, very hard to find out what the consequences were. It was painful.
Right. But I also thought with Connolly saying that, like, I have more to lose. It's my reputation. I so, you can look at that from the other way. Yeah.
You just don't ever get a sense of, she's having an affair with this guy, but where is it going to lead to?
Yeah.
She doesn't have any plan.
No, not unlike the statue in the museum. Merle, go ahead.
Back to the title, it was a loss of innocence. He
Yes.
says,
Yes, absolutely.
she lost her innocence.
Yeah. I do, when I look at books and like, did I like it? I always liked the dad. I thought the dad, and Merle, you said this right at the beginning, and I was glad that their relationship seemed to grow and get better.
Yeah.
That's that might be my wishful thinking, but
Well, because she didn't have much of a close and warm relationship with her mother.
Mm.
Because her mother was so involved in her own world with her art
Yeah.
that she didn't really give a lot of herself to her daughter.
Or
And
maybe,
father tried, I
yeah,
thought.
I'm gonna blame it on Daisy. Maybe she didn't flush the mother out for some reason.
Yeah.
You know, we just had so much more info about the dad. Also, I've never heard of a deli being called an appetizing store.
Yeah,
And which I thought was like, but that definitely, I'm trying to think. On Tui's, there used to be Fanny's
Mhm.
that only had, but I think it probably had meat too.
Yeah,
It's only the
yeah.
kosher places that, you know, didn't have the meat and milk together. So and you know, listen, it sounded good. And that Tom's, Joanna loved to go there for the whitefish salad. You know, I mean, that was a cute, you know, closing the circle.
Yeah, and he didn't have meat there. It was more of a kosher thing where
Oh,
it's
yeah, it was all
milk
milk.
instead of fish. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it was all milk.
yeah.
Brenda,
Are there,
go ahead.
are there actually stores in New York called appetite? You know, is there such a thing really? Or is
I
that
think there's a thing, I don't know if you call it that. There's definitely, you know, kosher stores. I'm trying to think on Devon if there were any.
I don't recall anything like that.
It was
I
only
think they were
Romanian.
still called delis. I
Yeah,
think.
what about the
They're
milk
all
pail?
delicatessens.
What
Yeah.
about the milk
Milk-
pail?
Mhm.
that
The
had-
milk pail was the milk pail.
But
It
did it have
was-
meat?
Yeah, it was a store.
Oh,
Yeah,
was
I
like
think they had
store.
everything because I know my folks
Yeah.
shopped there a lot.
yeah, back in the day. Merle, go ahead.
There was something about the ending that really surprised me. When she's looking back on the whole thing and what kind of advice would she give herself?
Yeah,
And the end of the book is just so open. She had no advice. Apparently, we just have to learn along the way. And she gives no advice to herself about the past.
yeah,
I was a little surprised by the ending. I thought maybe she'd have something
yeah.
that she
Yeah.
I'd love to go out to lunch with her. Because I'm like, how did you write this? You know, was this your experience? Did you have an affair with your professor? Yada, yada, you know, or look, maybe she knew someone who had an affair. I don't know. I just,
She was
but
pretty explicit about it, that's for sure.
yes, she was, Marilyn. I think this is her debut novel. I would definitely read another book by her. So that's my, and we're going to end. Oh, Andy, go ahead.
Just have a quick question. I enjoyed the book very much, but in hindsight, I had read Goddess of Warsaw.
Yeah,
Hmm.
sorry.
What happened?
Well, I had switched that because the Goddess of Warsaw came out before this, and I know people like to get it at the library. So that's why I switched it.
Yeah,
Now
and
I
I
do-
didn't even know about the switching, so I read.
I know. Well, thank you.
Yeah,
They're
I
both
started.
thank goodness they're both quick reads. Our
Yeah.
next meeting, and I just want to end on time because I want to go watch the convention. Is September 26th, Thursday. I'll send it out. It is the Goddess of Warsaw. Just think, you've gotten all those hours back. Some of you are already ahead of the game, and we're still meeting before Yom Kippur, before Rosh Hashanah even. So the holidays are very late. This Sunday is Day of Action from 10 to 12 at Macomb. Come on down. There's going to be a lot of interesting people there, and it's good to see everybody. And
And dress very cool because it's going to be 90 some
yeah, I
degrees.
saw that. It's
Yeah,
been so gorgeous.
I know.
I'm hoping that
gonna be there.
the weather could still change. That's
Did
my
you
hope.
know, Vanessa, that Rhonda was at the Milwaukee rally?
Yes, I saw on Facebook.
Did you
I
see
did.
her stuff?
Yeah, that's amazing. It's
Oh,
amazing.
I asked her about it today when we talked, and
Yeah.
she said it was just fantastic.
I
Do you
think it's been an amazing couple days for me, and I can't go wait to watch it again.
Oh,
Mhm.
what did
Do
you
you
think
still
about
need to-
Obama's?
Yeah. Brenda?
You still need people to write postcards?
Yes,
Good.
yes.
Okay.
The postcards are in the vestibule. They'll be there on Sunday, and we have lots of them and more of them coming. And I was very inspired by Michelle Obama, you know, get out there, do something, and writing postcards is just low-hanging fruit and anyone can do it.
Where are these postcards going?
They're going to different states to get out the vote. Georgia, you know, some of those swing states.
Did you see Warnock?
Oh, yeah.
And we did postcards for him and the other fellow, I can't remember his name. but he-
John Ossoff, the Jewish boy.
Right, I wrote
Man boy.
postcards for them.
Yeah,
And I said, I'm so glad to see him.
As
up
well
there.
you should. All
Weren't
right.
all the speakers wonderful?
They were.
They're so great. That's why, right before we got on, Hirsch Goldberg's parents
Yes, I was just
spoke.
gonna ask if anybody saw that.
And if you didn't see it, Google it and go watch it. I was crying. All right, everybody, back to the convention.
you.
Thank you for coming tonight. Bye-bye.
Right.
Bye.